The story that you are about to hear is a compilation of documented true facts, featuring characters, events, or places that has played a role in shaping history. Please sit back and listen as I recite this narrative for you. Smiley Face Killer was the name given to a serial killer that was allegedly responsible for a number of young men found dead in bodies of water across several midwestern American states from the late 1990s to the 2010s, who did not accidentally drown as concluded by law enforcement agencies, but rather were victims of a serial killer or killers. The term smiley face became connected to the alleged murders when it was made public that the police had discovered graffiti depicting a smiley face near locations where they think the killer had dumped the bodies in at least a dozen of the cases. Nearly 20 years ago, two retired New York Police Department detectives started tracking the suspicious drowning deaths of young men across the country. Victims were typically white, athletic, college students that had appeared in multiple cities and states along the I-94 corridor, which passes from Michigan to Montana. Former New York Police Department detectives Kevin Gannon and Anthony Duarte are convinced that the drowning deaths of hundreds of young men are the work of a serial killer gang. They say it started with the death of college student Patrick McNeil, who drowned in New York City in 1997. At that time, McNeil's death was ruled accidental due to alcohol intoxication, but Gannon disagreed after his own examination of McNeil's autopsy, crime scene, and evidence photos. He promised McNeil's parents, who also doubted official findings, that he would prove their son's death was a homicide. On the evening of February 16, 1997, Patrick McNeil, a junior at Fordham College at Rose Hill, left campus to go to Dapper Dog, a bar on Manhattan's Upper East Side. In the early hours of February 17, after throwing up in the bar's bathroom, McNeil announced to his friends that he would be taking the subway back up to Fordham. He waited outside for one of his friends, but when she failed to appear, onlookers noticed him start to stumble up 2nd Avenue. A double-parked van followed him up the avenue, stopped when he stopped, and turned on East 90th Street when he did. After that, no one saw Patrick again. After over a month of canvassing Upper Manhattan and hanging up missing person signs, his body was recovered floating next to a Brooklyn pier in the East River. The medical examiner who performed McNeil's autopsy classified his death as undetermined. His blood alcohol content was determined to be 0.16. The NYPD's official consensus is that Patrick drunkenly stumbled his way over to the East River, fell in, and drowned. To end up in the East River from 90th Street, one would have to cross the notorious FDR Drive, a limited access expressway with fencing on both sides. It seems nearly impossible that anyone sober, much more so when they are inebriated, could stroll over one of Manhattan's busiest highways unimpeded. Further oddities presented themselves during Gannon's investigation. Patrick's autopsy suggested that he was bound and burned before being placed in the river. Fly larvae were found on McNeil's body. Flies do not lay eggs in cold temperatures, such as the night that Patrick allegedly drowned. Eventually, Gannon and Duarte were joined by retired NYPD detective Mike Donovan and St. Cloud University sociology professor Dr. Lee Gilbertson, and the team started digging deeper into closed cases, eventually forming the smiley face killers theory. Gannon, Duarte, Donovan, and Gilbertson claim an organized group of serial killers would drug unsuspecting victims at a bar or party, then abduct, hold, and torture the victims before finally killing and dumping the bodies in water. The term smiley face became connected to their theory when the team revealed they discovered graffiti depicting a smiley face near at least a dozen locations where they speculated killers dumped bodies in Ohio, Pennsylvania, Indiana, Wisconsin, and Iowa. Even though the paint color, size, and style of the faces varied, they remained convinced it was a killer's signature claiming responsibility. Duarte stated that he believes the smiley faces are a taunting message to police, and Gannon thinks they might signify that the murderers are laughing at authorities. They believe that the young men were given a substance that would render them unconscious and be undetected by an autopsy and toxicology report. In at least 2 cases, unexplained drugs were found in the victims' systems, including the date rape drug GHB. Dakota James was 23 years old when he went missing in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. On January 25, 2017, around 11:30 p.m., James was walking back to his apartment after a night out drinking with friends and co-workers. He never made it home. The last known sighting of James, a graduate student, was caught on a surveillance camera in the downtown area. The footage captured James entering a dark alley, and that was the last time he was seen alive. The following morning, James did not show up for work. His boss informed his family, who filed a missing persons report 72 hours later. James' parents later hired a private investigator who organized a massive citywide search, which led to the discovery of James' body in the Ohio River on March 6, 2017, 40 days after he had disappeared. The Pittsburgh police theorized James fell into the river while crossing a bridge near the city center and drowned. They believe his body traveled for almost 10 miles and even went through a dam before its discovery. James' body, however, had almost no visible damage, which was highly suspicious because it had traveled through heavily trafficked river. A smiley face was found spray painted on an underpass near where James's body was discovered. Tommy Booth, 24 years old, disappeared on January 19, 2008 from a bar in Woodland, Pennsylvania. That night, he had been celebrating a friend's 21st birthday with a group of friends. Surveillance footage captured Booth entering the bar where the celebration took place, but there is no video evidence of him leaving. About 2 weeks after he went missing, Booth's body was found face down in a creek behind the bar. His death was ruled a probable drowning, and there were no signs of trauma. The area had been searched repeatedly in the weeks before his body was discovered, but no one had seen Booth. According to former detective Kevin Gannon and Dr. Lee Gilbertson, when Booth was found, his body was in full rigor mortis, which normally dissipates within 24 to 36 hours after death. This finding is inconsistent with the belief that Booth drowned the night he disappeared. Gannon and Gilbertson also noted the body appeared to have been staged. 3 sticks were strategically placed around his body, and there were shoe and drag marks in the soil. A smiley face was painted on a wall of the bar under a deck. On September 29, 2006, 21-year-old Lucas Homan vanished from La Crosse, Wisconsin. The day of his disappearance, Homan had been celebrating Oktoberfest with his friends. After a night of bar hopping, Homan headed home at around 10 p.m. with a friend. Homan and his friends somehow got separated during their walk home, and his friend ended up at the ER detox with a head injury after being picked up by police. He told investigators he could not remember anything that happened that night. Homan did not arrive for a golf outing the next day. Search dogs scoured the downtown area where Homan was last seen alive. According to police reports, one dog later hit on an SUV owned by a local band member who had played a show at the bar the night of Homan's disappearance. But the canine alert was inconclusive. Officials did not implicate the band member in Homan's death. The morning of October 2, Homan's body was found not far from the shore of the Mississippi River. His death was ruled an accidental drowning, and the autopsy report noted Acute alcohol intoxication was a major contributing factor. According to Gannon and Gilbertson, Homan had various injuries on his head, hands, and arms, and they theorized that a mark on his forehead may have been a footprint that was the result of Homan being held down. Homan was the 8th accidental drowning case in La Crosse over a 9-year period. A smiley face was found spray-painted near where Homan's body was found. Todd Geib was 22 years old when he went missing during the early hours of June 12, 2005 at a bonfire party in an orchard close to his home in Casnovia, Michigan. He was reported missing later that day by his mother, and a massive manhunt ensued. The night of his disappearance, Geib made several calls from his cell phone. One of them was to a friend who said she heard Geib say, "I'm in a field," before the call dropped. Geib's body was found 3 weeks later in a lake that had previously been searched. His death was ruled an undetermined drowning. Oddly, Geib's head and shoulders were sticking out of the water as if he had gone for a swim. Geib's remains also had very little signs of decomposition, which would have been present if he had died the day he went missing, 22 days before the recovery of his body. Alcohol and antidepressants were found in Geib's toxicology screen, but it was reported that Geib was not suffering from any form of depression at that time. A smiley face had been spray-painted on a tree near where Geib's body was found, and a smiley face sticker was later placed on his gravesite. A Navy veteran, 24-year-old William Hurley, went missing after leaving a Bruins hockey game in Boston, Massachusetts. On October 8, 2009, Hurley went to the game with 2 friends. Halfway through the game, Hurley called his fiancée, Claire Mahoney, and said he wanted to leave. Hurley walked outside while Mahoney drove to the stadium to pick him up. When she arrived, however, he was nowhere in sight. When Mahoney called Hurley to find out where he was waiting, Mahoney said he answered the phone and she heard him ask someone where he was located. The man said 99 Nashua Street, and Hurley said his cell phone battery was going dead. Mahoney drove to the address, but Hurley was not there. She called him a second time, but his cell phone seemed to be out of battery. Mahoney said she drove around for an hour before returning home, thinking Hurley got another ride, but when she got back, Hurley was still gone. She then reported Hurley missing, and various searches were conducted. 6 days after his disappearance, Hurley's body was found in the Charles River, close to where he asked Mahoney to pick him up. Investigators said there was no sign of foul play, and his death was ruled an undetermined drowning. Hurley's mother received a copy of the autopsy report and allowed a physician to analyze the report. She found out that her son had reportedly suffered blunt force trauma to the head, his eye socket, and behind his left leg. GHB was also found in his system along with alcohol. A smiley face was found painted near the river. On January 1, 2000, Northern Illinois University junior Brian Welzien went missing from Chicago, Illinois after a night celebrating Y2K with his friends. The 21-year-old finance student rarely partied, but since he was dedicated to the university's soccer team, he decided to have a few drinks for the new year. Welzien's friends said he had only 3 or 4 drinks, but by the end of the night, he seemed very intoxicated. Welzien told his friends he wanted to call it a night and go back to the hotel where they were staying. One of Welzien's friends, Nick Young, stayed behind. During the drive, Welzien started throwing up. His friend told him to get out of the car while he parked. Various witnesses outside the hotel saw Welzien vomiting in the street. His friends went up to their room and never saw Welzien again. When Young came back to the hotel around 4 a.m. and realized Welzien was not in the room, he searched the area outside the hotel. He could not find Welzien and reported him missing around 1 p.m. After extensive searches, Welzien's body was found 77 days later on March 17. It had been washed ashore on a beach in Gary, Indiana, 30 miles south of Chicago. Police said there were no signs of foul play, and his death was ruled an undetermined drowning. Investigators believed he could have walked to the edge of Lake Michigan, a 5-minute walk from the hotel, and fallen in. His blood alcohol concentration was only 0.08%. Police have not said if a smiley face was present near the death site. In 2008, the team publicly announced their theory during multiple national media interviews. They said the evidence they examined, evidence going as far back as 1990s, made them believe that the deaths of 45 college-aged male whose dead bodies were found in 11 states, often after leaving parties or bars where they had been drinking, are connected. Another detail Gannon and Duarte believe points to the fact that the men were abducted, drugged, and murdered before being placed in the water is that some of the victims' remains appear to be staged. When police located the body of 22-year-old Todd Geib in a previously searched lake 3 weeks after he went missing, Geib's head and shoulder were sticking out of the water as if he had gone swimming, according to case studies in drowning forensics by Kevin Gannon and Dr. Lee Gilbertson. In the case of 21-year-old Jenkins, his remains were found in the Mississippi River about 4 months after he disappeared, and he was discovered floating on his back with his arms crossed on his chest, according to the New York Daily News. As the team's theory gained attention, Minneapolis police did eventually reclassify one of the accidental drowning cases as homicide, that of Jenkins in 2020, after statements surfaced made by a convicted felon indicating foul play, though no arrests have yet been made. As for the dozens of other cases that remain closed and labeled accidental drownings, the team claims police don't want to admit they got it wrong. The FBI has discounted the smiley face killer theory, saying that many of the deaths appear to be alcohol-related drownings.
Hey everyone! I just wanted to express how grateful I am that you took the time to listen to my narration. Hopefully you enjoyed it. I am Twysted Mind and please enjoy the rest of your day. Salamat!